Welcome back to Filmonomics with Slated. I'm Steph Paterno, and we return to our talks where we hear what tricks professionals use to move their projects along. As you will hear, it comes down to knowing where you fit into the ecosystem and building a team around you to maximize your potential. You always want to be realistic, self-aware, and know your score.
So I went to graduate school at the University of Michigan, and there was an actor who, lived out just outside of Michigan, and he would come in and do talks. He was like a Hollywood actor, but he would come in and his talk would start with like, "I'm number 17." What does that mean? It's like there are 16 other actors that Hollywood goes through to before they decide whether or not they get the call for here. And I know that there are others below me. And so in the partnering with producers thing, I absolutely do it, but it's about knowing where you are in the number chain, because there are people that I would partner with who are what I would refer to as just more consequential than I am. And whether that consequential nature means that they have a deal with a studio where they have some where they have a put, or where they have some actionable piece. And then there are partners I have who are, producers who are less experienced or whatever fall lower on the number scale, as we comically put it, but who come with particular kinds of assets that are valuable. My feeling is everybody there's plenty of producing to go around. The era of the single, I worked for Scott Rudin for 7 years, who there is no better producer, in my opinion, that's worked in the last 25 years than that guy. He's unbelievable. He needs no one. As a producer, there's never been a movie I've worked on where I didn't need someone else.
Figure out what your resources are. I have a really smart friend who had just a little bit of money to work with, maybe $25,000. And he went around to managers and he said, "Don't give me your A-list writers. Give me your baby writers, and I'll work with them and I'll develop stuff and I'll pay them, a couple $1,000s or whatever." And to a writer, who's trying to make it and who's really talented, $2,000 is a few months of rent or whatever. Depends on where you're living. He had a little bit of money, and he made it go a long way. And all the important managers know him now because he did them a solid by paying their baby writers. They had an agenda and he serviced it, and now he has a relationship with them. So eventually when he wants that writer that they represent, they're going to cut him a better deal or make that introduction because he's done this other thing. So figure out what your resources are and work the system that way.
I feel that the way that I have to generate new context is that I constantly have to be finding something shiny and bright. Now, what does that mean? Once upon a time, for me at least, the business was almost exclusively trafficking in, an agent like this one sitting, formerly this one sitting next to me, would send a script from a major agency, and I would go, "Oh, that's a pretty good script. That's not a good script." It wasn't like I was sifting through the dustbin of random stuff that was just floating out on the internet. I would get it from a trusted source. Now, by the way, they don't do that. CAA doesn't do that anymore. They're not sitting around going "Oh, how do we ship out a bunch of scripts today?" Nobody that's insane. That's just not. It's not a good use of anybody's time. So part of the bright shiny thing, there was a moment where I was like, "Oh, I'm running a company now. I'm no longer in a corporation." But the bright shiny thing at that moment was a video game stuff. There were people who were, constantly the licensing of video games became this thirst as all movie studios were rushing to try and find their way into the tentpole event business, which now they are exclusively or almost exclusively in. Video game companies became places where there were storytellers. They had content that you could look at, and they had a kind of some level of professional accreditation as a function of the fact that somebody wrote a check to do it somewhere, even though it wasn't a movie. And so I kind of dove in with a company that then probably went bankrupt, but it was not my fault. It was not my fault. And I was searching through their library of cast-offs, but also the cast-offs of content that they had made, some sort of images or short films. Essentially they'd animated stuff that they were trying to show their their teams to say "Oh, here's this cool idea for a post-apocalyptic underground subway survivor, video game, which I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I suddenly had something new to sell.
People who are citizens of the world instead of citizens of Los Angeles and New York end up coming up with a lot better material than others. I remember when I was in the mailroom, my biggest takeaway from the mailroom when I was a trainee there was I had to sort everyone's mail every day, and I could see what people's subscriptions were, and the partners had, like, everyone had regular mail, and it was just the trades, but the partners had like the Atlantic, the New York Times. They had like all of these different publications on a daily or weekly basis, and I think that all of them had it, but nobody else did. And I just, that really resonated with me, and it's something that I've tried to carry in my daily practice. And
I say go managers first. Agents they like to be complicated, and they have their own agenda, and sometimes it's really, really hard unless you know them really well. I always say start taking managers out to drinks and getting to know those guys, and I mean, they seem to read everything quickly, and they want to put their clients to work faster, and I think sometimes agents are a little slower.
I find that investors are more open to making offers when you do contingencies. Like, we will invest $2.5 million into your film if you cast Zac Efron and 5 other leading guys. That way you can say your movie's financed when you call Zac Efron's agent, because because that would trigger the financing for your movie. So like, it kind of solves the catch-22. It puts like a universe, puts it in a universe that's doable for you and for the financiers, so they feel good.
Everything needs to have a reason for being, right? If you think about it this way, it's like there are lots of things you could do, but there are very few things you should do, which is what I tell my 11-year-old as well. But it's, the point is that for me, trying to figure out a way to communicate what the reason for being is, for me personally, I have to think about it. I read something, I imagine what it might be to participate in that movie or that television show over the course of several years of my life, what it would mean to use personal capital, both my human brain, life, existence, inner workings, but also who the people in my life who I care about, who I would say like, hey, will you come work on this with me? There's that thing where I have to be able to say like what it is to me. But then when I'm saying to a financier or to a distributor or a potential financial partner, like the reason for being is, and it has to be something that lands for them as an actionable reason for being.
All valuable advice, and a reminder that as much as Slated can help you find the right people and find the right projects, it really comes down to human ingenuity, how you use this information, and if you have the entrepreneurial gutsiness to make things happen, because that is something you can't turn into an algorithm. Anyway, thanks for joining us. See you on the next segment. Until then, don't forget to subscribe.